In the box behind me is the FoxAlien Masuter 3. You may have seen this advertised before, however, you will not have seen this version advertised, the Masuter 3S. This comes fitted with nema 23 stepper motors and is coming out very soon to the market. Today we're going to get it unboxed, get it built, and I can show you a little bit about it. So the first thing we need to do really is let's get this unpacked. So the first step, a very quick pause that is well worth the 10 seconds. Sometime in between this build video coming out and the full review coming out, I will be giving away 3 of these Masuter 3S CNC machines, courtesy of FoxAlien. So make sure you subscribe, make sure notifications is turned on, and also follow me on Facebook and Instagram just to guarantee you don't miss out on this giveaway. Let's carry on with the build. Is unpack everything, check that everything looks in good condition and cross-reference it against the inventory list. You want to make sure that all the parts are present before we begin to assemble. Now the next thing we need to do is obviously start the assembly process, and I will be following the instructions for this. If I think anything can be done in a slightly better order or a better way, I will highlight this as part of the video. But now we need to get all of this cleared out the way and begin the build process. First thing we're about to do is assemble the subframe. You're going to need the 3 loose parts of aluminium. One is a 2040 and the other is a 2020. Lay them out in this position. We can see one is marked up as the back right, so you do know the orientation for it. We're going to be using these M5 30mm bolts. These are the 2 longest ones in the pack, and all we're simply going to do is put them in either end to hold this bar in the middle. Once the bolts are in and you've started to pinch them up, just come in with your Allen key and just give it a final turn just to make sure everything is tight. You want to keep the top of the middle piece of the aluminium extrusion flush with the 2 other pieces, because the spoil board will sit on this later. Next we have brought in both of the Y axis. Y1 is on the left, Y2 is on the right. If you are in any doubt, the stepper motors point outwards and these plates are angled towards the back. Obviously we have the right back highlighted on the frame. Now what we're going to do is use the M5 20mm flat cap bolts to basically put these in position. We're going to bring them in, slide them over the frame, put the bolts through in place and just hold each axis in place in order. Now because of the size of the stepper motors on these axes, they do have a tendency to try and make it lean out. So just get 2 bolts in like this to begin with, and it will just guarantee that that stays in place while you go around and get all of the other bolts in. Now when it comes to tightening the bolts up, go around and get them all in place loosely and just work around systematically, slowly tightening them up. Before you give it that final half a turn to lock them fully in place, just come in with a tape measure and check the measurements. You want to go from corner to corner diagonally, take that measurement and then check it on the opposite way. Now these measurements should be exactly the same. It's say this does assemble itself pretty well in terms of keeping the machine square. If the measurements are out on either direction, then just adjust the frame until those measurements are right, because ultimately this stage is very important for keeping the machine as square as possible, which will make your life easier. Once you have it in the correct position that you're happy with, just come in and give it that final half or quarter of a turn to pinch all of the bolts up. Next we are about to install the dust guards on either side, and it is a really nice addition to see that these dust guards actually wrap all the way over the top, because it means I don't have to design dust shoes anymore to cover them. Now in terms of the dust rails, they will only go in one direction. They have a long lip and a short lip. The long lip has to go on the bottom pointing inwards. These should be held in place with the M5 16mm button cap bolts. So we're just going to get these in place. The holes should align up, push it against the axis, and then you can just bring in the bolt, put it in place and start to tighten it up. Next we are installing the bed. Now whilst these boards are symmetrical front to back and left to right, there is a top side and a bottom side. Now the threaded inserts should be on the underneath, and ultimately the wider gaps where the bolts should be on top. So I'm going to flip this one over, and therefore all the threaded inserts are now underneath. To hold them in place, we're going to be using these M5 20mm bolts. We're simply going to drop them in, align them up with the holes below and start to get them in position. So we're now about to install the X-axis with the Z-assembly pre-built. Now this does have a bit of weight to it, so do be careful when handling it. We've got to fit it to each of these end plates using M5 flat cap 20mm bolts. Now as I say, this does have a little bit of weight in it. What you can do initially is rest it on the dust guards as you start to get it in place for the bolts. So that is possibly the fiddliest part to do of this build. If you are struggling with the weight, use some boxes or books to keep this propped up to help take the weight. The other thing you want to do as well is try and keep both of those end plates as parallel as possible, and this will just help get the piece in place and align the bolts for the holes. Next we have bought in the spindle mount for the 52mm spindle hold. Obviously if you're dropping a router straight into this, you can go straight to the 65mm one. And we're going to hold this in place with the M5 16mm bolts. So the easiest way to do this is just get one in place first and then go around and add the others shortly after. It doesn't matter which way the opening is, it can be on the left hand side, it can be on the right hand side, it really is user preference. But once you can get the second bolt in there, it should make life that little bit easier because you don't have to take the weight of the clamp itself. There we go. We'll carry on and get all 4 bolts tightened up. Now before you tighten all 4 bolts up completely, bring in a square and just check that that bracket is looking pretty accurate on the sides and on the front. When you're happy with it, pinch it up. Now this isn't the correct way to check that everything is running square, but for now it will do just as we're setting the machine up. We're going to bring in the spindle, drop this in place. Now in terms of the position of it, I normally like to have it somewhere around the middle, and say just for good grip and stability. And then what you want to do is just pinch up both of the bolts sequential. So basically tighten one up a little bit, get that in place as it starts to grip, move on to the next one, give that a few turns. Then once that one starts to grip a bit more, go back to the first one and just keep doing it in turns. You don't want to apply too much pressure to either particular bolt because you will ultimately end up threading them. So just give them a quarter of a turn each, keep going back and forth to clamp that spindle up. Now if you're new to CNC, you may not have seen these type of nuts before. They're what's called eccentric nuts, and they help adjust the pressure of the wheels on the rail. So you can tighten it up or loosen it off, say, in order to control that pressure. Now if I show you something, you may just be able to hear this. As I press this up, there's a very slight clicking sound. If I press it on the other side, there isn't any. Now the reason for that is one side is tighter than the other and it's allowing the axis to rock left to right. So we need to tighten this one up in order to match the other side. Now in order to do that, you'll want to use the smallest of the Allen keys and just release the 2 little grub screws. Doesn't need to be much, maybe a quarter or a half a turn, just enough to release the pressure on them. Then what we want to do is bring in 2 other Allen keys, maybe the next 2 up work ideally. Put one in one hole with the straight edge and then the short one in the other way. Now what we can actually do is turn this around and apply more pressure. Now if I go to press that, all of the rocking and the noise has gone out of it. So what we can then do is just pinch those back up a little bit and that should hold it in place. If you are finding that this isn't adjusting, you may need to release the bolt slightly on the back of it just to release the pressure on the entire nut. But also once you've done that, just check that everything moves as expected, and we can now see that that isn't rocking and is much firmer than it was originally. I should also point out these nuts are also on both of the Y carriages, so if you are finding that they're rocking a little bit as well, go ahead and tighten those up. So I've now spun the machine around 180 degrees. We're about to install the drag chain bracket. Now this goes on the rear of the machine, connecting to the 2 end plates. To hold this in place, we will be using the M4 8mm bolts. These are pretty small, they can be a little bit fiddly, so it sometimes helps just to get them in place on the Allen key first, and then come in and start to put them in the hole. Give them a few turns, get one in place before moving on to the other side. If you're in doubt in terms of the orientation, the cable clips go underneath and the flat side remains on top. Next we're going to install the little light. Now as we're looking at the back of the machine, there are a lot of holes on the back of the Z assembly. It goes to the 2 to the far left. Again, we're going to be using the M4 8mm bolts to put this in place. So we're just going to bring one in, do exactly the same, with a couple of turns to start to get it to grip, and then come back and get the second one in. Now, I said earlier, if I found a better method than in the manual, I would highlight it as part of the process. This large drag chain bracket technically is meant to be installed later on. However, as we're working on the back of the machine at the moment, we may as well put it in place. This is the larger out of the 3 brackets, and this one just goes right here in this top right hand corner on the back of the Z assembly. This is held in place with the smaller M4 8mm bolts, so we'll go ahead and get that in now. Now, there are 2 holes on the side of the stepper motor here. This is to take the smaller of the bracket, and there are also 2 holes just underneath the end stop down there on the bottom left hand side to take the larger bracket. So that one over there, this one next to the stepper motor. Now, in terms of the bolts to use, the one going next to the stepper motor takes the M4 8mm bolts, and the other one takes the M5 12mm bolts. So we'll go around and get these installed now. In terms of the installation, the one next to the stepper motor, the L should be facing down. So the first one is in place. Essentially the bracket's more or less flush with the top of the stepper motor now. Now, I couldn't understand why that bracket wasn't going in. It's clearly because I've got my left and right mixed up today. Actually, the medium sized bracket goes at the back of the machine right here. There are 2 threaded holes in the extrusion, so now it goes in nice and easy. Next is installing the drag chain. This can be a little bit fiddly because of how long it all is, but in my opinion the best way to do it is get it all roughly in place first and then go around putting the actual bolts in. Now, in terms of the drag chain itself, you will have one end that has these black connectors on, and you will have another end that has all of these metal connectors on. These go to the control box, so in essence these are the ones that are going to go furthest away. So what we're going to do is basically get all this in place, just sort of sitting on or close to the brackets where they need to be fixed in position, and then we'll get the bolts in. So the drag chain is now roughly in place. The side with the cable tidy effectively comes in from the back of the machine and touches down on that first bracket. The drag chain then wraps around the stepper motor, and we can fix it down to the second bracket underneath there. Then on the second half of the drag chain, this fixes to the mount that we put on the back of the X-axis. Again, 2 bolts will hold that down there. And finally, it touches down on the bracket at the back of the Z-axis over here. Now, in terms of holding this in place, there are some very small M4 6mm black bolts, and effectively it's 2 in the end of each drag chain section. Now, the other thing to take into consideration as well is these cables need to reach all of their connection points, which we'll come on to shortly. Now, you can move them about even when the drag chain is in place, so don't worry about it too much for now. But if you find that maybe all of your cables are inside of the drag chain, just shuffle them about a bit and pull a little bit of excess out. But we're going to go around now with all of those black bolts and fix this in place. To save the drag chain moving about, it's sometimes easier just to get 1 bolt in each fixing position, and then you can go around and add the second one in. Now, the cables can get in the way, so do be careful when doing this. It's very easy to knock the bolt out of position, but if you can drop it into the hole and then just locate it on the thread and start to give it a few turns to tighten it up. So once you've gone around and got all 8 bolts in for this drag chain, that is essentially the core part of the assembly complete. You may have some bolts remaining in the pack. That is perfectly normal. They often put some spares in there. What we now need to do is go around and look at all the connections and get those done. Now, when it comes to wiring up the connections, every cable will have a label on it that tells you basically what it is aligned to. For example, this one says Z motor. We have a 2-pin prong on the back of the Z motor, so we know that that one will go and connect in there. We also can see there is a second port available for the Z motor, so we'll go and find that one. And again, this one fits the same port. They will only go in one way. So once it's in there, it should click, and that is done. So we're just going to work around and do all of the other ones, the limit switches, the motor for the X-axis, as well as the spindle, and then move on to do the other wiring on the outside of the machine. So that is the first set of wiring done on the back of the Z assembly and for the X motor. Be careful when you are pushing the connectors in. Some of the pins can be delicate, so just make sure that the terminal is aligned up correctly. But we'll move on now and get the other ones done. Now we're about to complete the final part of the wiring, but before you do this, just check the power supply for your machine. We can see that this is marked up here for me as 220 volts because I am in the UK. There is a red switch on the side here. Make sure that is also reflecting the same as your country. So if it's 220, it should say 220. If it's 110, it should say 110. Now that is quite crucial before you turn the machine on for the very first time. But we know that is now set correctly. So what we're going to do is just again work around all the connections. It is exactly the same as before. Every cable is labelled up and every port is also marked up. So it's just a case of aligning them all up and getting them all connected. So with everything now built and connected, there is one final check you'll need to do before moving forward. Make sure both of the y-axis are in the same position. Now there is a chance that they can slip out of position, so before connecting this up and turning the power on, you want to make sure they are in exactly the same alignment. Bring in the tape measure, measure from one side down to the front plate, take that measurement, do exactly the same on the other side, and basically just make sure both of the measurements are equal, and that should then mean that your x-axis is parallel with the rest of the bed. So that is your Masuter 3S now set up. You will have a few things left over, such as wrenches for the spindle, a spare belt, and also a Z probe. Now the Z probe just connects to the back of the control box, and you set it up in your control software a little later on. Now it is an optional extra though, so sometimes I find it's better for beginners to not use that at the start. Once you've learned how the machine runs, then learn how to use the Z probe a little bit later on. But it really is user preference. Now in terms of getting this set up on a PC or laptop, there will be a link in the corner, probably right above my head, that takes you through to my follow-on video, which pretty much covers all the basic steps for getting this installed on your PC and working through up to doing your very first test cut. So definitely go and check that out after this video. I do hope you found it useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel if not done so already. Thank you all very much for watching. Final thanks as always goes to my patrons. If you want to get involved for giveaways, early access to content and one-to-one help, then definitely check out the Patreon links at the bottom of the description area. I will see you all on the next episode.